And strangers and orbs. Okay, we're just going to run through the strangers, what they do, what you need to know about them, and how to exploit them, and then we'll get onto orbs. So mercenaries, they're the little guys in helmets that will pop out and offer to fight for you for money. They behave like familiars in that they will wander around the board one step per turn, but a mercenary can kill monsters. If they step on a monster, they'll kill it. Um, the downside to that is that if they step onto a flagged cell, they don't ignore flagged cells, so they can just wander into territory that you already know, that you've already solved, and sometimes you'll hire a mercenary and he'll just hang around in the corner, happily killing things or doing very little. They're usually very useful though, and they will do some solving for you. But again, be careful with stage mods. If you have explosive, they will collect loot for you and they can kill you. There are nomads, sort of trader types who will buy things from you or sell things from you. I mentioned it earlier on, but a nomad can buy omens from you. Um, they will, if you buy an item from them, they will sell you repeated copies of that same item. And if they're selling, sorry, if they're selling, you can buy repeated copies, and if they're buying, you can sell repeated copies. Although there aren't many situations in which you can have more than one copy of an item. It can happen, not that often. A pyro will throw a flare in the direction that he's pointing, and you can see that there's actually a very small green arrow pointing in the direction that he will be firing. A cell will continue moving until it hits something. If it hits loot, then the loot will not be destroyed by flares. If it hits a monster, the monster will die. If anything is hit by the flare, then that cell will gain the burning sort of effect, and just be a little bit careful there. The flares will wrap around the board, so if they go off the top, they'll come back out the bottom, sort of a la Pac-Man rules. So be aware that a pyro will usually eventually kill themselves. This is quite beneficial though, because it will usually result in them, well, sometimes result in them dropping either a matchbook, which makes a load of more pyros appear, or the Ruby of Flame, which allows you to apply or remove burning from a cell. Blacksmith, pay him some cash, and he will make you an item of armor after a certain number of turns. One thing worth pointing out that any stranger that works on turns, so like mercenaries wandering around or blacksmiths doing their thing, or like a pyro will throw one flare per turn. If you want them to do their thing more often or more quickly, don't click on individual cells. That will speed up a blacksmith, that will make a pyro throw more flares, things like that. And it's particularly useful for getting a mercenary to wander around more quickly. So exploit that if it's sensible to do so. You'll get a lot more value out of your mercenaries that way. You can use a blacksmith to repeatedly generate more armor. They can only make one thing at a time. If you take a particular, I believe it's a mastery. Oh, no, sorry, no, I tell a lie, it's a legendary item. You can right-click a blacksmith to spend double the coins, but make him finish instantly. It's a bit expensive to do that, so, be careful. Water Boy, he has a very niche use. Every turn, he will throw a bubble, and if a bubble touches an item, or a stranger, or a monster before it dissipates, it has to be a revealed monster. You can't do it with flagged monsters. That will be encased in a bubble, which is what they refer to as one of the orbs. An orb will persist on your screen until you click on it. So you can use a water boy to smuggle like items of loot or chests or things like that into other levels. So potential uses are like you can keep a few hearts just floating around the screen so you can effectively pop them out when you need them. Or in particular, if you can get the water boy to stick some loot into bubbles for you on a level that has like an explosive mod, then you can open that loot on a level where it would be safer to do so. So water boy can be useful, not often that useful. You can smuggle, what do you call them, pyros into other levels. That can be nice. You can also choose where you put the pyro that way, because the orbs will float around the screen. And you can use the sort of the tracking, like the cursor keys, to very precisely dictate where the orb will be popped. There's the priest. Priest will Priest will remove your omens and will sanctify cells. Don't worry about sanctify too much. It doesn't come up very often, and it's not very useful. Priests tend to be expensive, but omen removal is valuable. An elder, they will only appear if you have a mastery, I think, and they will activate your mastery's active ability. We'll get onto masteries later on, but elders can be useful. They can also be expensive. Bear that in mind. Scribe has a couple of effects. They will either put an item from your inventory into one of your heirloom slots. Heirloom slots are filled when you craft an item. Or a scribe will increase the number of heirlooms in a slot for you. They are late game relevant and are useful. They can be expensive. If you're not currently using heirlooms, they are a very good target for Purse Cutter, the magic item that steals coins from people. Hungry Plants is basically Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors. If you feed it a number of items from your inventory, they will give you an indicated thing in return. They're useful for getting rid of items. They do that. And if you have a particular the item that summons more of them, then you can choose to only feed them. Well, you have to only feed them the items from the back of your inventory, like the end of your inventory. Otherwise, delete them at random. So they're good for getting rid of omens, but they can also eat your entire inventory before they get to the omen. So just be a bit careful. Harbingers suck. They will do something bad to you at the end of the level, unless you pay them. And they charge normally quite a lot of money. And they will do things like take coins from you, or just apply a lot of damage to you for no reason. That's what's bad about the apocalyptic mod. You can end up with 7 guys on the field that will do damage to you at the end of the turn and at the end of the level unless you pay them. They get really quite bad in a hurry, and they do feel a little bit unfair when you lose to them. Bagman is interesting. He's another one of the negative guys. If a bagman appears, he will empower monsters by an amount. So he will add a certain value that he tells you to the monster's minimum damage. So they will always do that number more damage to you. If you pay him, it will reduce the amount that he empowers the monsters. If you keep paying him, he can actually reduce the amount of damage that monsters will do to you. So a lot of bagmen on the field, if you have a lot of cash, can result in you actually having monsters that will just only do 1 damage to you. They can be useful if you have a lot of money. And then the orbs, I believe the only 2 orbs in the game are bubbles, which we've discussed with the water boy, and cankers. Cankers are little black things, little black spiky things with grinning faces on that will just happily float around the screen. If you click on one, you take 1 damage. They just exist to get in your way and block your screen. If you have a lot of cankers going on, you're just going to have a hard time sort of picking through them to actually get to the cells you want, and they block your view as well. Cankers are a tremendous pain, but shouldn't often be that much trouble. They can be, not often though.